Hey toy fans, Aaron here. Today taking a look at the retro collection release of IG-11 from The Mandalorian. He comes to us on the vintage card back with those printed white worn edges running all around the card to make it look like it's a worn down card sitting on the shelves for many years. The Star Wars Mandalorian logo on top, his name below that. On the background, pretty nice image of IG-11 as we saw him. I think that's the planet Arvala when they were trying to get to Grogu. Towards the bottom of the card, you still got that very large retro collection sticker, unfortunately covering up the majority of IG-11's body. And through that blister, you get a good look at your action figure and the two included accessories. Here's a look at the back of the card, where on the top half it talks about the line being inspired by those 1970s figures. Through the middle in the red are your handful of figures that are available in this wave of retro collection figures. This is the third wave. And then on the bottom half of the card is the legal information. Taking a look at the figure out of the packaging, and once again, just a reminder in case you're new to this line, as I already kind of mentioned as I talked about the back of the card, this is inspired by those 1970s figures and made to look like those. So you're not getting today's sculpt, today's paint job with these figures, and I'm quite all right with that, since that's not what the intention is. The intention is to make it look like the action figures I had when I was a child. And this one definitely gives me all of those feels. Now for this character, IG-11 does have a bit of a different look from IG-88. Unfortunately, the action figure we're getting is based more on IG-88. Only difference is he's got a double bandolier and magically now IG-11. While they are very similar in their looks, some of the smaller differences as you kind of go in closer is the head for IG-11 is just a bit more cone shaped than IG-88. Also, the elbow joint on the arms are much more higher than the lower ones that IG-88 has. Chest detailing is a little bit different, but once you get into this retro figure and due to the placement of the double bandolier, I think anything that they would have done retro collection wise probably would have turned out pretty much like what we have here. And then through the legs, the detailing at the top of the legs would have been just a little bit different, and also some of those hoses running up and down on the leg instead of having that texturing would have been smooth pipe for IG-11. That said, this still really is a great looking figure. Overall, the figure is done in what you see is a bronze color, and this is a pretty tall figure coming in at 4.5 inches in height. Taking a look at the head sculpt, you're still getting a nice run of red sensors painted in, running around the top part of the head. Relatively decent sculpting otherwise for the various curvatures of the head, the various indents that were otherwise present on the character, and a few other, I guess you'd call them sensors or something, kind of just sticking out from the face and the side of the head. Looking at the shoulders of the figure, here also things seem to be pretty much identical with that original IG-88 release. You're getting a slight bend at the very low elbow of the figure where you got these little rib textures sculpted into the elbow joint. Otherwise, some various mechanical features being detailed into the sculpt. And I like the touch of copper painting at the top of the shoulders, each one of those. It's a nice little added touch of decoration in an otherwise single color of a figure. Through the chest, as I mentioned, this character did have a double bandolier, and we're getting that here. While this is all done in a solid chunk of plastic, you still have some nice dimension or depth with those two bandoliers. You can certainly make out that one is draped over the other, and with the depth of the plastic and the different layers to the body, it seems like it's sticking off the chest a bit. That dark gray color painting for the bandoliers placed right where it needs to be, not bleeding off the edges or anything. And then you got some silver painted in for, I guess what would those be, ammunition shells or something on the front of the bandolier. Otherwise, some nice mechanical sculpting again for what they're trying to achieve. But due to that double bandolier, this is where the variations come from the IG-88 sculpt. While a lot of the base sculpting for those mechanical features kind of around the waist are there that was on IG-88, like I said, due to that double bandolier and the addition of the plastic to kind of push that out a bit, that's where some of those gaps and fine details to the sculpt have been filled in. Here's a look at the back of the figure where still a lot of mechanical detailing being sculpted in, some various lines for just some definition, some hoses coming out of those mechanical parts also being sculpted in there, and still some nice painting for the bandolier. Through the legs of the figure, the detailing of the sculpt seems exactly the same once again from IG-88. For the hoses and such running down the front of the leg and on the sides, you got some great detailing being sculpted in there just to kind of give each of those hoses a bit of definition. You can certainly make out some various mechanical features as well. And then you get down to the feet where they kind of look like mouse droids without wheels, but very much in line with how the character looked. A little bit of line detailing on the outside of the foot, and if you can make it out just on the inside, a little circle in there, kind of what would otherwise be the joint for the movement of the ankle. to note, this one does not have any movement in the ankle, obviously, since that's not something they did back in that time. One thing to note, though, the way, at least on mine, I think it's the way it's sculpted and not a warping of the leg, because it's a pretty firm plastic. But if you've noticed, I got the character leaning forward, and that's so that he won't fall over. The legs, at least on my figure, kind of have a sculpt where they angle back just a little bit coming out of the top of the feet. So if I were to bend him so that his body is more upright, he would unfortunately fall backwards. So I don't really know if that's something anyone else is running into, or maybe indeed mine just did get a little bit warped. As far as articulation, pretty standard stuff here. Head does a full 360, both shoulders spin all the way around, and then the legs come straight out and a little bit back, about, I don't know, almost 45 degrees. And then for accessories, he's got two of them. You got a blaster rifle and a blaster pistol. Very much in line with, once again, kind of like a broken record here, what IG-88 came with back in the 80s. Starting with that blaster rifle, pretty decent detailing to the sculpt. Overall done kind of in a dull black plastic. Certainly no other weathering or anything to it. Not that there should be for this line. But yeah, like I said, a lot of detailing in there. You can make out the scope on top. Looks like a second scope also. A pretty well-defined barrel to the rifle. A little bit of texturing on the handle also. And he can firmly hold it in either the right or the left hand. And then finally the blaster pistol. This time same as the others in the newer Retro Collection line, done in the black plastic rather than the blue that was done in the original line, which IG-88 did receive. But yeah, sculpting otherwise pretty much identical. Relatively decent sculpt. You know, you're still getting some detailing in there of the scope on top, little clip on the side, some sights on the top of the barrel at the end of the blaster, and same as the rifle, you can fit it in either hand of the action figure. So overall for me, it's a great looking figure. I mean, even for its time, or the time that they're trying to go for, it's not a bad representation of what was seen on screen. Certainly you're not getting the detail within the paint job that we do today, but in terms of looks, and in comparison to, you know, some of the other characters that are done in that retro fashion, I think it really turned out well. So I guess even back in the 70s and 80s, Hasbro, or really Kenner, still was doing a better job with the aliens than they were the human characters. You know, it's the third figure I've done in the line, so I've already mentioned it a few times, but I love that we're getting characters from this new property being done in that retro fashion, being done in that style of the action figures I had when I was a kid. So that's going to wrap this one up. I'd love to know what your thoughts are on this figure in the comment section below. And as always, thanks for watching.